Welcome to Rising Woman Leaders. I'm your host, Meredith Ram, and I believe the time has come for women to share their gifts, their voice, and their stories. I love seeing women spiritually and financially empowered, thriving in their life's work, and doing what they love every day. I've gathered a community of women living their dreams to tell us their stories and inspire us to step into more courage, self-love, and feminine leadership. If you like this podcast, follow me on Instagram at Rising Woman Leaders and sign up for email updates at risingwomanleaders.com. Now get cozy with a journal and a cup of tea. I hope you enjoy today's show. I'm here today with Leah Morris. She's a relationship transition coach, founder of Life Remade, a published writer and speaker. She helps people to authentically process their feelings, thoughts, and emotions in order to give them a deeper understanding of themselves and others. And her work consists of three main areas: relationship trauma recovery, communication skills enhancement, and empowered personal development. She specializes in helping her clients gain a solid sense of self-worth, develop unshakable intuitive confidence, and heal after emotional heartbreak so they can find the deep and meaningful connections that they've been yearning for. So thanks for being here, Leah.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. Hearing that read back to me is just like, wow, I feel like I'm finally at a place where I totally take ownership of all of that too. So yeah, thank you for that introduction.
You're welcome. Yeah, I felt the same way when people have done that for me. I'm like, wow, like I'm doing it.
Yeah, totally.
Because it can be a long journey to get there and to be that guide for others. And
absolutely.
Yeah. So I know that your journey to do this work stemmed from your own personal journey of relationship, heartbreak, and transition. And I feel like I'd love to just start there. You know, what was that journey like for you? And where are you now? Where were you when that was going on? How did you find yourself?
So many good questions.
Yeah.
Let's see. This is something that I typically share. I think our stories are really important. And although I don't encourage, totally identifying with your past stories, I still think that they're definitely important to share, so that others can sort of see themselves a little bit more clearly too, depending on where they are in their journey. So my past story is that I grew up the oldest of 7 children and was always just very much a nurturer, very much played the role of oldest child / second mother to everyone in my family, including my own parents at times when they were going through emotional situations. I kind of found my own sense of worth in being the emotional rock for my entire family, which also created sort of an unhealthy way that I connected with people, and also a bit of a wall that I had up to ever really express how I was doing. I never wanted to be a burden, right? So translating that childhood story into my adult life, at age 30, I found myself in a marriage where I had an ex-husband who was extremely emotionally dependent on me, in a multitude of ways. I was your classic codependent who needed to be needed. And I was in a relationship with somebody who was a narcissist, who fed off of my need to be needed. And luckily, some pretty traumatic events happened in that relationship. I think when I speak of trauma, there's just such a big range of what that means. And I think, there's emotional trauma, there's physical trauma, even spiritual trauma. And so I think I was experiencing all those different sorts of traumas in small ways, medium-sized ways, and big ways. But the ones that really helped me to, I guess, wake up were the big ones. We all kind of wake up for different reasons. And for me, my reasons needed to be like a punch in the face. And they needed to happen a few times. So what ended up happening shortly after I got married, so while I was on my honeymoon, I lost my grandfather. He passed. He was very old. We kind of knew it was coming. But nonetheless, it was upsetting and heartbreaking. And through that experience and seeing how little I was supported in my emotions by my partner really woke me up to, wait a minute, this is not okay. I can't be the emotional rock at all times, and life is going to get harder. And so as we continued through our partnership, I lost a couple more family members that year, and just realized like I can't keep going at this pace. I didn't know who I could turn to. I used to always say this phrase, I wish I had a friend like me. And, someone who really cared and checked in. And, but what had happened was I kind of set up my life that way. I'd set up my life to where everyone needed me and they didn't really know what was going on inside of me. And so once I finally took ownership of that, I left the marriage. A couple of my close friendships had to naturally fall away. I needed to restructure the relationship I had with my mom. I needed to move. I needed to find a new career because I was fully working for my ex-husband. I had no home. So pretty much all the pieces of me that I once clung so tightly onto were now sort of splayed out in front of me in all these pieces. And for the first time, I finally had to ask myself, like, well, what do I want rather than what does everyone else need? What do I want? How do I want my future to look? What does my dream career look like? What do my relationships need to be giving me in return as well? And that was sort of my starting again. My beginning was the end of all of that. All of those past stories needed to happen in order for me to begin. And that's kind of that was about 3 years ago. So that from that point forward has been this complete transformation of my understanding of myself, the world around me, the ways that I'm kind of getting in my own way, the fact that I wanted to help people to see what I saw, and people who were specifically in the situation that I had been in, to show them that there's a way through this, and a way that's not just a Band-Aid, but a catalyst to something incredible. So that's the short story of how I got to where I am now, or at least how I began.
Mm-hmm. And how long ago was this?
So this was about 3 years ago, which thinking about it now doesn't seem like that long ago.
Yeah.
I mean, 3 years is just a blip. But looking back at the person that I just described to you that I was, it feels like a lifetime ago.
Yeah. Yeah. And I wonder if you could share more about codependency and what it is for anyone who maybe has heard of it or not heard of it, but wants to understand more.
Sure. Um, I guess the way that I understand codependency and the way that it's been explained to me and the the way that I use it when I talk is when you find your sense of value and your sense of worth in something outside of you. So you are dependent on an external force to validate you rather than being able to self-validate and self-assure. And it's tricky because most people think the opposite of that is independence and to be completely separate and to not need anyone. But my beliefs about what's healthy sort of lie somewhere in the middle of that. We really do thrive when we have each other and when we have community and when we can rely on others to support us or encourage us. But I guess when we're finding our own sense of worth in others and sort of waiting breathlessly to get that, and it's sort of changing the ways that we're interacting with everyone and everything, and it's changing the intention behind why we're doing things. That's codependency. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, what's coming to my mind? I mean, it comes out a lot of different ways. One of them, a fear of being too much. I've had a friend who's, felt that way sometimes, and I'm like, no, I'm good. And like, because maybe she's afraid that, she'll lose a friend if she's too much, or she needs, yeah.
Yeah, I've heard someone say this once, and I don't know who said it, but it's codependency is when you are basically you're showing up too much for everyone else and not enough for yourself.
Yeah.
Just a simple way of putting it. And thoughts of like, am I too much? Am I not enough? You're constantly considering everyone else's perspective of you rather than asking yourself, like, is this true for me? Am I living authentically? And it's that people pleaser mentality, I think, that really ends us up in situations where we're quite honestly just manipulating everyone else's perspective of us because we're too scared to show up as ourselves.
Yes. I've also seen it show up like they need everyone else around them to be okay so they can be okay. Yeah. and also that's kind of a fine line with like being an empath, right? Because it's like if you're feeling everyone else's feelings and you need to make sure everyone else is okay, then you can be okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'm glad you brought that up because I am highly sensitive and incredibly empathetic and just like highly perceptive of everything. I'll oftentimes like sense that somebody, feels uncomfortable just by the way their eyes kind of dart away from me. But it's interesting you bring up, the empath piece, because when I was deciding what I wanted to do with my career, I was beginning to really entertain being a life coach. But a big part of me also was wanting to self-reflect on, is this another way that I'm acting out of codependency? And just trying to really make sure that my intentions behind coaching were not from a place of needing to be needed, but from a place of service and knowing that, my message is important. And also sharing with others that their message is important and trying to find, I guess, personal empowerment in empowering others as well.
Yes. Yes. And part of my work is helping women to start and grow their businesses. And something that often comes up and that I like to, just reflect on with them is, am, am I needing to get another client so that I can feel validated, that I can feel okay or good about myself? Or do I need that person to say yes, or to make that money out of a sense of, because my worth relies on it? And as soon as we make that distinction and can separate, no, I don't need that person. My worth and my value is inherent.
Mm-hmm.
Whether I have 100 clients or 0 clients, that is untouchable.
Mm-hmm.
And often when someone makes that shift, it's like the clients start coming. And it's
Mm-hmm.
there's less of that pressure or grasping or holding on to it because we need it. It's more just oh yeah, I just have a lot to give and I want to help people. And if it's for you, great.
Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh, I can totally relate to that. And I think it's if you put yourself in the position of a client, they're in a space where they need to be supported. But if you are putting off the energy of I need you to need me, that's a lot of pressure to take on. And even if it's not something that you actually say to them, they can feel that oh, this person's counting on me to sign up for them. And it kind of it pushes people away who are coming for support, coming to receive rather than to have to give. So yeah, anyway, I can definitely relate when I first started my business, feeling that need and that white knuckle grip on needing that enrollment,
Yes. Yeah. And can you speak more about what a narcissist is? Or what you know about that, what you've learned?
What I've learned, yeah. And I'm really careful to describe these things because I'm not a therapist. So, there's so many resources that you can look up codependency and narcissism. But the way that I understand narcissism is, and my perspective on this has really evolved. A narcissist stems from somebody who has been extremely emotionally neglected as typically as a child, which creates a personality disorder. So personality disorder is different from something like codependency. Codependency, I would feel is a little bit almost more of an addictive trait. Personality disorder is a navigation system that people use to understand the world and to survive. So a narcissist, from what I understand, was not allowed to be weak, or was really just reprimanded for that, or reprimanded for having emotions or needing, right? So they've developed this deeply ingrained fear of vulnerability, and of appearing like they don't have it figured out, appearing weak. They need to have people look at them in awe. And narcissism is also on a scale. Sometimes it's very, very slight taste of a narcissistic trait that someone can have, which often just kind of seems like emotional immaturity. And then there's these grandiose, which is on the other side of that scale, which no regard for anyone else's well-being or point of view. It's just, how is this making me look? And one key point that I want to make too, that a few therapists have told me, is that narcissistic personality disorder is a person that lacks the ability to have empathy or compassion, and they instinctually know this about themselves. And so they are really drawn to people who are highly empathetic and highly compassionate, because that's the thing that they long for the most. So that's why a lot of times you'll find codependents and narcissists like attracted to each other like magnets.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's really true. And I definitely am thinking about a few people I've, who've crossed my path over these years. And one person in particular that's coming to mind, I felt so triggered by them and like what I was seeing them doing and interacting, and how this person was hurting someone that I loved. But I had a dream about them one night, and it was like I found this box that was like locked deep inside their heart. And I opened the box, and it was just like so much pain. And it really, I was like, oh, okay. Like that person has got that locked up and pushed away deep, deep, deep inside. And yeah, it's good, I think, to reflect on like people become that way because of something that happened. And
yeah, it's easy to point the finger and say like, what a monster.
Yeah.
But, and I think it's also easy to call someone a monster when you are highly empathetic and compassionate, is because you have a bleeding heart and you're always just like, oh, but they went through this. And so for me, at least, I found like I almost needed to villainize him, or my ex specifically, before I could find compassion, because otherwise I found too many reasons to open back up.
Yeah. Boundaries. Yeah. How do you help your clients shift out of the victim mentality?
Yeah, this is all about ownership, in my opinion. I think that one thing that I've learned is sometimes tough love is just as important as soft love, I guess. And so when I have a client who I hear them getting wrapped up in their story of victimhood, I hear them, telling themselves that disempowering narrative of this person is doing this to me. This person is doing this to me. This situation is creating this in me. I always sort of love to ask the question of, and why are you choosing that for yourself? That was one of the main questions that pulled me out of my victimhood, or at least began the process of that disentanglement. I think getting out of a victim mentality is a process. It's not just like oh, I figured out I'm not a victim anymore. There's so many different blind spots that will show up over time. And if you have the courage to take ownership of your life and of the things that you're choosing and the way that you're showing up and navigating, I think that the process will continue to unfold. But I think the main question that I usually ask my clients is, and why do you think that you're choosing that? What are you getting out of that? Because there is something. There is a reason why you're continuing to choose. Nobody's handcuffing you to that situation. And I think that really poses some important, thought-provoking things for them.
Yeah. Yeah. Sitting with, what am I getting from this? Because there's usually some kind of benefit underneath. And often we are attracting situations and triggers and continual patterns because it's like exactly what our inner child is asking to be healed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. The inner child work is something that, as I work with my clients, we end up there, or at least like towards the middle of the program that I usually work with clients through it. But it's first that realization of like, taking ownership. Oh, this is just a story. Well, what am I getting out of perpetuating this story for myself? And what part of myself was I trying to heal? And then that's kind of where the inner child comes into play.
Yeah. And then there's just compassion, just like, of course, I just want to love that part of myself. So I want to ask you about like leaving relationships and knowing when to leave relationships. There's something that was coming up when I was working with someone recently of a fear of being selfish. That like, oh, like, it's like, a lot of fighting. It was continuing. She's working hard at it. Things aren't changing. But like the thought of her really just claiming her own life or choosing a new way, or it was like, oh, well, that's kind of selfish, or that would hurt that person, or that maybe I'm not trying hard enough, and I like to think too that like life doesn't need to be suffering. Relationships like can be really healing, and especially if, of course, they're triggering sometimes, but if we're willing to both show up and do the work, like it doesn't need to be so hard, and like it's okay to just claim a fun life and like do things for yourself. And but yeah, I'd love to hear just your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I totally subscribe to everything you just said. It should be full of joy and pleasure and light. A couple things come to mind when I'm sort of thinking about that question. I've done some inner child work recently, and I actually ended up sort of being able to have a conversation about it with my parents, which was really powerful. And everything that I had sort of visualized giving myself, I finally asked for, and they listened, and I realized like not everyone has the luxury of doing that. But my dad told me something that I really wish I would have heard when I was a child. But I'm so happy that I have this wisdom now. And there's something about hearing it out of the person's mouth who you just kind of, you wait on their every word. He said, because I started to tell him what I wanted and needed. And I said, I know I shouldn't maybe be talking about this because our other family member is going through so much right now. And he said, whoa, whoa, whoa. At some point it needs to be about you. And honestly, it can be about you, even if it's also about everyone else too. There doesn't have to be a choice. We can make this conversation about you, and you can say what you need, even if everyone else around you is also in need. And it was like permission to be selfish without feeling guilty, because we all need something. And there's no hierarchy of where those needs deserve to be placed. And I think oftentimes as really, highly empathetic people and, even people in our work, there's this idea that we can't also be the ones that are needing. And that, everyone else needs to be tended to before I can say what I need. So that's one thing that comes to mind. And another thing that comes to mind is she sounds like a people pleaser. Someone, and I'm not saying that in like a negative way. It's just kind of what I'm hearing. And sometimes what's really helpful for people pleasers is to imagine themselves outside of themselves. So if there was a duplicate her, and she's sitting there saying, I need more for my life. I need this. I need that. I want to leave. This is making me extremely unhappy. I feel stuck. And she's having this conversation with herself, but the only person who can choose is her. So she's seeing herself in her true expression and having a conversation. And her true expression self is maybe saying to her, like, these are the things I need, but it's up to you to choose for me. Will you choose for me? And there's part of that people pleaser brain that wants to please that person too, right? Who wants to say like, oh no, I don't want you to be hurting, and suddenly we see that we also need to take care of ourselves. And part of being a people pleaser means pleasing ourselves too. And if anything, like if anyone, that's the person that we should be answering to. So that might be helpful in terms of like a visualization, just to see yourself outside of yourself and ask, how can I make her comfortable? How can I make sure she's taken care of?
Yes, that's so helpful. Yeah. What tips can you share around just communication? Anything that you've found to be like again and again really useful for clients or yourself?
With communication, the first thing that's coming up for me is stop apologizing, which is easier said than done for some people. This is something that, I used to apologize for everything. I would apologize even in the way that my tone was, ending my sentences in a question mark, sort of asking for validation from the person that I was speaking to. Like, is this okay? Are you okay with what I'm saying? Rather than this is what I'm saying. And that's okay. And we can have a conversation about it. So looking for ways that you're apologizing for being yourself, and for saying what it is that you want to say, or for not saying what it is that you don't want to say, I think is a really good stepping stone. Take "I'm sorry" out of your vocabulary, because often the things you're apologizing for, you don't need to be sorry for.
Yeah, that is really helpful. Just like the awareness of our language, and how our language just can speak so much and reflect. And often it's like running on autopilot, how we are speaking about ourselves, or things that are continual or habitual.
Absolutely. It's one thing that comes to mind is, so my partner now, who's just incredibly, he's amazing. He's super compassionate and really sees me even when sometimes I don't see myself. When we first started dating, I was still in this over apologetic mindset, very unsure of myself. And a lot of the sentences that I would say would end with, yeah, this is how I feel, but I don't know. So everything ended with, I don't know. And eventually he said, you say I don't know after everything, but you do. You do know. Just try not to say I don't know anymore and see how that feels. And it was this simple switch in the way I was communicating that helped me to take ownership, finally, of the things I was saying. And it also made people trust me more, because they didn't think that I was questioning myself all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Standing in that, your own pillar of just alignment and integrity. So it sounds like you're in a beautiful relationship now. And I know it was probably a journey to get there from the divorce. Could you just speak to anything that, like, during that time of healing or reclaiming, like, what really helped you to come back into your fullness, your aliveness, to attract a new partner?
Oh my gosh. So many things had to happen. So many people and so many messages and so many decisions. And, I think something that really, really helped me to show up more fully in my partnership was to have more than just one thing holding me up, meaning really developing more of a community. The friendships that I began to foster, having people to emotionally support me through a really tough time in my life outside of that relationship, and not putting all of that pressure on one person to be everything for me. I think changed the way that I view relationships, and was actually kind of a difficult thing for me. Like, well, if he doesn't need me, and if I don't necessarily need him, then what does that leave us with? And the beauty of that, it leaves us with the freedom to want each other.
Yeah.
And that is so much more healthy feeling in my body and with him. But, it did start out very, there was still that codependency coming up for me. But at least I was aware of it to sort of know, like, that's there and I'm working through it. I was very communicative with him about it. Like, this is something I want to work through. And so he had a really beautiful way of holding me accountable and saying, like, I don't want you to count on me for that. I don't need you to constantly be the only one that I turn to. I want to have friends outside of this. You should have friends outside of it too, if that's what you feel. And so it was really beautiful to have someone who didn't want to take advantage of me being in such a vulnerable place and having such unhealthy habits. It really helped me to foster a lot of the best friendships that I have today, which is kind of how I met you, is through one of those amazing friendships. I don't know if that fully answered your question, but that was what was coming up.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful. I even still sometimes today, of course, being in relationship is a dance together and working together and collaborating and all of that. But sometimes I still ask myself, am I doing everything I would be doing if I were totally single or totally on my own? And that's a good pointer for me. Just if I'm letting the relationship become, taking up more of that space of like, just, falling into it or losing myself and remaining autonomous and just going after the things I care about in my dreams, so that we get to keep showing up as whole people who feel fulfilled outside the relationship. And I love what you said about just the freedom of, continuing to be together. It's every day gets to be that choice.
Yes.
And it's like no one is making each other stay or feeling like they need to stay out of obligation. It's like, I get to choose this person every day. What a gift.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I mean, don't get me wrong, sometimes it's a hard choice.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'll be the first one to say, like, I don't believe there is a perfect relationship as far as like what society thinks perfect is. I definitely go through my ups and downs, but I think knowing that it is a choice on both people's ends, and also along, what you were saying about losing yourself in the relationship, it kind of reminded me of the first part of this conversation about the coaching business and needing it to be this thing. And when you finally sort of realize, like, if I wasn't a coach, I would still be me. I would still be kind, and I would still be the type of person who notices things that not many people notice. And I would still be someone that, whatever you are, it's like I love that exercise of, well, if I weren't this anymore, if I didn't have this partnership, if I didn't have this business for myself, what would I be? And reminding ourselves to have that confidence that that's not going anywhere. It's not contingent on a relationship or a business. It's in us.
Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah. And there's a question I like to ask sometimes on this podcast around our fears and facing our fears. And I'm curious, either in your journey of being a business owner and an entrepreneur, or maybe in a relationship, what has been a fear that you've faced maybe in the last year or so, something that's come up, and how did you overcome it?
Mm-hmm. I want to answer this with the lens of career because I know your audience, and having my own business that's now thriving is something that I really didn't think I could do in this amount of time. So the fear that I'm thinking of right off the top of my head is money. And I think this is something that I keep stepping more and more into and leaning into because it has made me so uncomfortable in the past. And I always had this idea that other people make a lot of money, not me. That's an other person thing. And I always had this story in my head that I didn't have what it takes. Well, money doesn't want to be around me. And also I kind of resent money because of it. And I had this relationship with money that was really based on a lot of hatred and fear mainly. And sort of ending up in a place where I didn't have enough. So this constant lack mentality, and that definitely clouded the way that I started my business, for sure. And for a while, I did have other means of income outside of my business for a couple of years, actually, because I was building that up. But when I finally realized that I didn't need to be scared of money, and in fact, it was also there to support me as a part of my community and as a part of my network of support, sort of that energy of money being like, I'm here to make sure that you get your dreams met and that you help others and that you're able to create an impact in the way that you feel that you're being called to. And sort of changing that fear of money to love and appreciation, and sort of like a looking forward to being around it and having and being supported by it. I did a few visualizations around it, but also something that really helped was to talk to a coach of my own and for her to sort of give me permission to create my own meaning around money. And to say, like, that's also a story you're telling yourself, which is beautiful because that means you can also change the story. And so I asked myself, what story do I want to be telling myself around money? And that completely has shifted my business. I am not constantly pulling my hair out, worrying. I don't help as many people at a time, which allows me to be more present with the people that I am helping. It creates a different level of, I think, respect for me to the client because I know they're really invested and they're showing up. And it also creates a different level of respect in return towards me because they know that I value my work and I'm there for them to show up fully. So it's been around money is like is the main fear, and really overcoming that has been life-changing for me.
Yes. Thank you for sharing that. I think that is so important. And this is one I know a lot of women struggle with. I'm sure a lot of people listening resonate with this. And if they get to take away from today, like I get to write a new story with money, that's going to be life-changing. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So is there anything just in your business that's coming up that you feel excited about, or how can people connect with you if they want to learn more about what you're doing?
Yeah. I mean, everything's exciting about my business, right? I don't have any. Oh no, there's an event coming up in October in San Francisco where I'll be doing a workshop. I do one every year at this event. It's called City Fit Fest, and it's a festival that is mainly it draws people who care about their physical well-being, but also their mental and emotional well-being. So I am going to be doing a talk there. That's I think the third weekend of October. I am also going to be working with some companies in the Bay Area through a group that I'm involved with called the Creative 8. And we go to different companies and we offer all sorts of wellness offerings, anywhere from like mobility exercises to nutrition to life coaching. So that's something that's going to be new that I'm really excited to get my hands in. And of course, my favorite piece is just my one-on-one coaching. This is where I really can create some big transformative pieces, movement pieces in my one-on-one clients' lives. And I just love developing that super intimate connection with them. And that's, of course, always available on my website, which is liferemade.com. And most people can just find me there, or even on Instagram, I guess, which is Leah, Leah Morris, Morris. So Leah E. Morris is my Instagram. And I like to do a lot of my writing there. It's kind of like a coaching diary of a coach on Instagram.
Beautiful. Thank you. Yeah, we'll include those links in the show notes so people can access them easily. Any closing words? Anything you feel called to leave people with today? There's this little voice in my head that pops up every now and then when I'm really listening. And all I can hear her say is, don't stop here. So maybe there's somebody out there that needs to hear that of, I know there was a time in my life where I thought, is this it? Is this really it? Is this as far as I go? Is this as much as I'm going to get out of this life? And I really wish someone would have said, like, no, this is not it. Do not stop here. You have to keep looking. Keep asking those questions. Keep challenging your comfort zone. That would be my closing statement. Thank you. Yes. So I'll just invite us to close our eyes and to breathe that in. Allowing these words to resonate through our body and in our heart. To keep growing, to keep challenging ourselves, to keep showing up in new and bigger ways, to keep showing up to our creativity, to our relationships, to the things that scare us, the unknown, letting go of people or places or things that are no longer serving. And just taking that and any other words of wisdom from today that you wish to carry with you as you go out into your day and into your life, May that resonate with you. I bring my hands to my heart with so much gratitude. Thank you so much, Leah, for sharing your wisdom with us.
So much gratitude.
Yeah, thank you. Namaste.
Namaste. Thanks, Meredith.
Thanks so much for taking the time to listen to our show today. We would love to hear what you think. Take a moment to hop on over to iTunes and leave us a review. We'd be so grateful to receive it. Until next time, namaste.